Join the conversation with Coach Ray.
Welcome back to Join the Conversation with Coach Wright. I'm your host, Certified Recovery and Executive Coach, Corinne Wright. Today we're diving into a powerful topic that's essential for any relationship, emotional regulation. In this episode, we'll explore how couples can navigate their emotions in a healthy way, allowing them to thrive together instead of letting emotional turmoil drive a wedge between them. Emotional regulation is more than just managing your feelings. It's about understanding them, communicating them effectively, and supporting your partner through challenging moments. We'll talk about practical tools, tips, and strategies to help you and your partner build a deeper, more connected relationship. But before we dive in, let's recap your homework from the last episode. Your assignment was to develop 3 positive affirmations to combat negative self-talk. If you haven't created those affirmations, please take some time to do it this week. But if you have, take a moment to reflect on the affirmations you created and how you can start integrating them into your daily routine to shift your mindset and reinforce positive thinking. These affirmations are meant to help rewire your thought patterns and give you a more empowered mindset. Now, I'm excited to introduce our special guest today, Shane Neff. Shane is a compassionate and dedicated licensed marriage and family therapist, working with individuals, couples, and families to help them overcome challenges and build healthier, more fulfilling relationships. With a wealth of experience in both adolescent and adult therapy, Shane brings a strength-based and somatically informed approach to her practice. This unique style blends the mind-body connection, offering clients deeper understanding of how their emotions and experiences shape their relationships. Shane's therapy methods incorporate a variety of evidence-based modalities, including dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed CBT, Gottman theory, solution-focused therapy, and imagotherapy. With her versatile, comprehensive approach, she tailors her work to meet the individual needs of each client, helping them achieve their personal and relational goals. I am thrilled to have you as a guest today, Shane. Welcome to Join the Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Corinne. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Of course, Shane. You have such a rich background in this space. I was excited when you agreed to doing the show. So I want to ask you some questions because I know everyone out there is wondering, what is emotional regulation before we dive into the topic of it? Do you mind just sharing with the listeners what emotional regulation is?
Yeah, for sure. So emotional regulation is really an accumulation of skills that we use to manage our emotions, especially when they get intense. And a lot of us were taught these skills when we were young, through our caregivers or our peers. And some of us weren't taught skills, or maybe not like in the way that we really need to handle life stressors as they are right now.
Thank you, Shane. Now that we understand the concept, and I was just thinking back to when I was young and how I responded to different things and what my aunt used to say to me when she'd say, "You're always so quiet when it came to emotions." I would stuff them away and go be by myself to process and then come back and interact with people. But just seeing how I navigate now is very different because I had to grow out of it. However, emotional regulation is a crucial thing in relationships. And I would love for you to share some insights on how does this go beyond just communication during conflict?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. In my experience, a lot of this is related to trust, and our ability to manage conflict really impacts our ability to trust our partners or anybody that we have a relationship with. It can really damage emotional intimacy if we're unable to share hard things. Like if you're
Yeah.
worried that your partner is going to become really dysregulated, if you share something that might be uncomfortable to them, it can make it hard to have that really deep emotional intimacy.
That is so true, Shane. It's I can envision this argument with two people where let's say the man in the situation doesn't want to respond with his feelings because his feelings might trigger a reaction from his partner, and then she cries and he doesn't want that to happen, so he doesn't do anything. In the heat of conflict, many people tend to react impulsively, and sometimes it's hard to do what you haven't been taught. Like you said, if a person didn't grow up using these other skills, all they know is what they know. So reacting impulsively might be normal to them. How can couples shift from reacting to responding thoughtfully to each other? What does that shift look like? And, why is it important in relationships?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of my absolute favorite techniques is to monitor your heart rate and don't try to have hard conversations or respond until that heart rate is below like 90 beats per minute.
That's
Sometimes,
interesting.
yeah, sometimes having that like concrete sort of analytical way to monitor yourself can really help a lot of people.
That's a good skill. How would someone monitor their heart rate?
You can set a timer, for example, and do 30 minutes and just using your fingers right up where your chin kind of meets your neck, right up there in that nice soft spot, and just count your heart beat, and then double that if you're doing 30 seconds, and whatever that is, would be your beats per minute.
That sounds somatic, is it?
Yes, yes, it is.
I love that. And it also sounds like a genius buffer between emotional trigger and response. It's almost like if I choose to do this instead of responding, it gives me something else to do, distracts me from how I'm feeling, and I can actually think about what needs to happen next before jumping into action.
Yes, 100% it helps with that impulsivity. And when I teach people skills, I'm all about skills that are both like bottom up, like your body soothing the brain, and top down, where you're using more cognitive kind of work to soothe the body. Because different people have different ways of self-soothing, and some might prefer one over the other too.
Do you mind sharing with the listeners what somatic is or what it means so that they can be with us as we're going through these teachings today?
Yes. So somatic is also an approach where you are really honoring that mind-body connection.
So, Shane, you're both a coach and a therapist. Can you give an example of how you apply somatic in your practice?
So when I'm doing somatic work in my practice, usually, well, it's with the video on. And while we're talking, I'm very much aware and tuned into what's going on with my client's body language, or even when I have couples in session, both of their body language and how their body language seems to interact with each other. And then we'll talk about that. What does that mean for that individual? What do they notice about their partner, perhaps, and how can they use that to manage their emotions and help manage their conflict too?
That is excellent. I'm seeing the couple sitting there across from you. I'm seeing someone's hands wringing and they're maybe folded in, and the other partner is talking and they're giving their firm statements, but you're reading the room. You're literally reading what is happening with this person while this other person is sharing their emotions. This person may be shutting down, and you're teaching them how to read each other's body language.
Yes, yes, 100%. Because we're not always cognitively aware of that too. Sometimes we notice that and we make assumptions based off of body language. So it's important to be able to communicate that and really shine a light all over that.
That is excellent. I'm reflecting back to I had a girlfriend who every time we talked about fun stuff, she'd laugh. But sometimes when we would talk about uncomfortable things, she would still do that same laugh. And I said, "Why is everything so funny to you?" She says, "It's not funny. I'm just uncomfortable." And I
Hmm.
had no idea that that was her way of coping with uncomfortable situations because it was the same thing I saw when she would see something funny. And so getting to know people in this form of communication is so important, especially in relationships, because if we don't understand why our partners in life are responding a certain way, and maybe they can't tell us because they don't have the words to say those things or they fear what saying those words might do.
Yes, 100%. I think that's a big piece of this. Really getting to know your partner can also include getting to know their body language. And it really helps with emotional regulation because if you are able to not only manage your own emotions and also notice and advocate when when your partner might be experiencing like global activation or a fight or flight response,
Yeah,
being able to set a healthy, kind boundary around that can really improve your relationship dynamic.
absolutely. This is a version of what people mean when they say doing the work.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, definitely. It is for sure hard work too.
yeah. What are some specific CBT strategies couples can use to identify and challenge the unhelpful thoughts that fuel tension and escalate arguments?
So I really like to look at thoughts almost like a buffet, where there are lots and lots of different options that we have when it comes to our thoughts. And before you pick and choose kind of what you're taking off of this buffet and putting on your plate, you want to
Hmm.
filter that through two things. First, is it true? And second, is it helpful? And if it's not both, you might want to go back to that buffet and find
Mm.
a different thought to kind of internalize.
That to me represents mental flexibility at its finest because it's not limiting
Yes.
you to the autopiloted responses that you're usually picking the same two emotions or responses. This is saying, hey, you have a limitless amount of directions that you can go with this. Pick what serves you.
Yes, we do really get to notice and choose which thoughts are us because sometimes our thoughts can actually come from other people, like people from our past or our caregivers. Sometimes these
Yeah.
thoughts we have might actually be someone else's voice, and it's important to be really curious about, okay, what's mine and what's helpful in this moment.
That's the way forward. That is the only way forward. So, for all of you out there who are dealing with spiraling thoughts, whether they're related to your own life or your partner, your relationship, consider what we're saying here and try to practice some of these things today because they're free. So, nothing is stopping you from just taking these tools and applying them. See how they can change things for you over time. Shane, can you tell us a little bit more about DBT and share some of the techniques that can help people stay grounded when emotions are high?
So, DBT stands for Dialectical Behavior Therapy, and it was created by a woman named Marsha Linehan. And she actually combined elements of like Zen Buddhism with CBT to help create this more like bottom up and top down approach. And it's very, very skill based and it greatly helps with emotion regulation.
What are some of the techniques that you use or that you have used?
Okay, so it's so hard to narrow this down. There are lots and lots of DBT skills, and they are all really, really helpful. I always say I feel like we should put DBT in the water because I think our world would look very different if
Uh,
everybody had
if everybody
access.
had access.
Yes. Um, and there are a lot of skills because it is so important to have lots of tools in your toolbox because the
Hmm.
same skill isn't going to work across the board with every issue, right?
Right.
So I think my absolute favorite when you are feeling very, very dysregulated would be the TIP skill. It's TIP, TIPP, and it's an acronym. In DBT, We love our acronyms. Um, so the T stands for temperature. So I always say if you're warm, use something cold. If you're cold or cooler, use something warm. So this could be something like splashing cold water on your face,
Hmm.
drinking a hot cup of tea. A really easy one would be to put a cold ice pack on the back of your neck.
Hmm. I've seen
And
people do
this,
that.
yes, it really helps your blood pressure come back down. And then the I stands for intense exercise. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just get up on your feet. You can do some jumping jacks, dance around the house, maybe lift a few weights, hold a plank, that kind of a thing. And then the P stands for paced breathing. And there are lots and lots of
Mm.
options for paced breathing. So, really finding what works for you. Um, the thing that I would add to this one is whatever form of breathing you are using, make sure you exhale for like 1 or 2 seconds longer than you are inhaling, because that's also going to stimulate the vagus nerve, which is essentially the body's brake system for your nerves.
Oh, Shane, thank you for that because I love breath work so much. I love taking a pause with my coaching clients and doing breaths and they can feel that immediate release of tension. But that additional piece of information where you said to let the breath out for a couple of seconds longer than what you took
Hmm.
in, what nerve is that it's connected to?
Oh, the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve. And that does what again? Educate our listeners today.
Okay, so in really simple terms, is basically like pumping the brakes for your nervous system.
Nice.
And then there's one more P in the tip skill, and that's progressive muscle relaxation.
Mm.
So, really, you're going to sit down and get nice and comfy and basically go from the top of your head all the way down to your toes using one muscle group at a time. And you'll want to deliberately tighten that muscle group and then let it go and kind of work all the way down the body, tightening and relaxing.
It's almost like giving yourself a massage internally.
A little bit, right?
Yeah, that's the only thing I can relate it to is the feeling you get when someone's taking that massage from your neck down. These are things that we can individually apply to ourselves to gain that release. That's a very good one. Tip, TIPP.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't have to, I mean, ideally, you'll do all four of those. You don't have to. If you can only access one or two, that's okay. This is not an all or nothing situation.
That's good to know.
All right. And then the next one is maybe a little more accessible. Say you're at work or, right, you're in a situation where you can't just go grab an ice pack and put it on the back of your neck.
Hmm.
This would be square breathing. So you just picture a square and it has four sides. So you are going to breathe in for 4 seconds and hold that for 4 seconds. And then breathe out. And then you want to do this 4 times. And now DBT will say breathe out for 4 seconds. I like to add that little somatic piece of breathe out for like maybe 5 or 6 seconds. And this one is really convenient because you can use it like in the heat of the moment. So, say you're having a conversation with your partner, just taking this little bit to pause and engage in square breathing can help stay grounded even when emotions are high.
And that I've seen when people are very upset and but the breathing doesn't look calm. It looks like fists balled up and you're kind of, but it's, hey, but it works
Yeah.
apparently,
Yes,
so
if it
yeah.
works. Yeah. And then the last one I think is my personal favorite. It would be soothing with your five senses. So bringing in little pieces of sensory information and one sense at a time. Maybe you squeeze a little stress ball for touch. Maybe you even have some chapstick or lip balm in your pocket and you take that out and put it on and really focus on how that smells for a few seconds,
Mm-hmm.
or take a sip of your drink, right? And pay attention to the taste of that. Um, Soothing with the five senses is a great way to help you kind of re-enter the body and really ground.
Mm.
Yeah, so I always recommend you can, well, for people who are struggling with emotional regulation, to keep something in their pocket, and then you can use that. Say you're having a hard conversation with your partner, right? Bring that out and use that even during that conversation and throughout it to help prevent your emotions from going so high.
Like it goes back to when you see someone wringing their hands when they're having a hard conversation. It's like you need something to help you see it through. Let me just pace myself through it. And what if you have this stone that you like to carry? Or some people put rubber bands on their wrists. Is that for a similar purpose?
Yes, yeah, that would
Yeah.
be for a similar purpose. Yeah.
Good to know for all the listeners who are out there. And as you're hearing us talk about these things, give yourself a chance to apply them. That is the only way you will ever know if they can work for you. But to apply nothing is not giving yourself a chance. So please give yourself a chance and just apply them. Now, Shane, how can couples use these tools together to stay in control and prevent arguments from spiraling out of control? So let's say you're going to confront your partner about something, or where they've done something that, makes you upset, or whatever the case is, but you're in that right before the heat of the moment begins. So what's a tool or some way that they can both approach this to not lose control, but to apply these tools to manage control?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to remember that arguments are not necessarily bad. Sometimes we really believe this, that it's bad to trigger our partner or it's bad to feel angry or frustrated, and it really ends up snowballing and increasing that emotional intensity.
Mm.
And then I'm big into co-regulation. Our bodies actually really tune into each other. So if you are working on your stuff and using your skills to stay nice and regulated, your partner is more likely to regulate with you.
Now you're taking me back to my marriage coaching days, Shane. The first thing that came up for me is when you have partners who are not necessarily in agreement with
hmm
that piece. When you said, you have you working on yourself and your partner's more likely to, we know that that is a true statement because we worked with a lot of individuals and the couple wasn't always there together, so that
hmm
individual can take those skills home. But how do you get the individual to comply if they have the wrong attitude about how things are, where things are right now?
Are you talking about like if your partner is not doing the work, for example?
Exactly. And you
Okay.
really want to, you're trying to be your best self, but they're just not there. How do you gain that collaboration?
Yeah, I mean that is a very tricky one. I feel like we could spend hours talking
We
about that
can.
specifically, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of that would be boundaries and specifically boundaries with love. One of my absolute favorite phrases for these situations is, "You are too important to me to have this conversation right now."
Mm.
And that's just a way of exiting that conversation with love. So you're not escalating the situation by like storming out and slamming the door, and you are consistently communicating this boundary of, we are only going to have these conversations when it can be safe for both of us.
That is an excellent thing to point out. That's actually our next episode, how to establish healthy boundaries. So this is going to be a great segue into what comes next. Now that you have these tools that Shane is sharing with you, how do I not only apply them, but how do I hold space for myself to grow as a result of these things that I'm doing to develop. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah. And it's very likely that's going to irritate your partner or trigger them. And again, that's okay. It's important to remember that our emotions are not bad. The behavior might not be okay, and the emotion is not necessarily bad. So if your partner's irritated by your new boundaries or your growth and progress, that's okay for them to be a little irritated by that.
Right, right. It's all about us learning what types of work we'll be doing for the rest of our lives, because we're on a journey that the work never stops. So being irritated might be something I need to look at. Why am I irritated by this? And let me resolve that. That's not for you to resolve just because you shared something with me that happened to irritate me. And that is important because a lot of people in relationships do not speak up. And the reason I get from people is because they feel like the way it comes out in their head is the only way for it to come out, and it's not good. It's not good in their head. So they don't say anything.
Yeah.
They're just like, ugh. And that suppressing those emotions come out in other ways that aren't healthy. So
Yes,
yeah.
100%. A lot of people will feel that way, like, oh, I'm super regulated. I don't bring up hard conversations. And overall, it does usually come out in other ways when we try to do that.
Yeah. Sometimes arguments just seem to escalate, though, Shane. So let's say some cases where you have the two people, they're trying to apply that work. But what's the most effective way for couples to create a pause protocol before things get out of hand? And how does this protect the relationship from harmful patterns?
Okay, so I always recommend getting to know what's called your emotional thermometer or your distress thermometer. So it's the scale from like 1 to 10, and really getting to know at what point on this thermometer is it really hard to regulate your emotions, and noticing even what are your cues that you might be getting up there. So say at an 8 out of 10, I can no longer have empathy, and I can no longer have effective conversations. What are the signs that I'm getting there? And definitely taking a break and pausing before you hit that point where it's too hard to walk away.
Yeah.
And this can be things like your body responses. For me, it's if my hands start to get shaky. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm noticing, okay, my hands are a little shaky, that's my cue that I need to exit this conversation and I need to take a break.
That's good. That self-development piece, that getting to know yourself, understanding your own triggers and your own emotions so that you can be responsible for them instead of other people having to take responsibility for them. We want to be in control of our own emotions and not have them be things that we have to apologize for all the time. So this is really good. And like Shane said, pay attention to the physical side of you and what changes happen when you're reaching that number so that you can decide, hey, these are the things that I need to do when I begin to reach this number. You already have those things decided before going into action with anyone. Those are like individual inner self boundaries. I know that when I reach a 7, there's no more room for conversation. But how am I going to communicate that? That's where we want to be thoughtful, because some people will probably put up boundaries and not communicate what's happening. And then that creates another problem. So having the right communication is key in the second part of what comes after you're doing the work within yourself and within your relationships here. So thank you for that, Shane, because I can imagine that cartoon Arthur, you know how they show his little fist balled up?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like when we get to that point.
Exactly. And that can be part of it too, recognizing and getting to learn your partner's emotional thermometer.
Yeah.
Like my spouse, he knows that when I do this thing where I like squeeze my thumbs when I'm upset, and he'll notice, hey, I can see you over there strangling your thumbs, honey. Like, what's going on? And so sometimes that can be really helpful when we can bring in like that historical context of your partner really well, and how can you also help them so you can feel empowered.
Yes, absolutely. And having a partner that's equally open to make space for what's going on with you and how you're feeling, that is
Mhm.
essential if you can get there. And if you don't have that kind of partner, it does not mean you cannot get there. And if your partner's not open to going to coaching or therapy with you, that does not stop you from being able to still bring those skills into the home and change and develop yourself in a way that now they're responding and reacting to that. And now you're kind of still in there. So there's always a way to address any of these things that you're hearing that might resonate with you today. But let's touch on emotional safety, Shane, because this is something that a lot of relationships struggle with. And this is why people might suppress or act out in different ways. But it's the foundation of a healthy relationship. What does emotional safety look like, and how can a couple actively create and maintain it in everyday life, everyday interactions?
I think emotional safety is really being able to show up in your relationship, warts and all, within reason. And as a massive disclaimer, everything I'm talking about here today applies to relatively healthy relationships. If you're in a relationship where you're experiencing abuse, my approach would be very, very different too. So definitely keep that in mind. In general, being able to show up, warts and all, in your relationship and be accepted just the way you are,
Mm-hmm.
even with your emotions, can definitely create a foundation for emotional safety in a relationship.
It's like knowing that there's not going to be this bad consequence if I say how I really feel or if I express myself physically. What if I like to use my hands when I'm explaining myself, but knowing that that's okay and it's not going to be
Hmm.
a negative outcome if I show up as me.
Yeah, exactly. One
Yeah.
of my favorite phrases to teach people is essentially just because I'm mad, it doesn't mean I don't love you, right? It's okay to make
Yeah.
me mad. That's not going to change the way I feel about you.
Because emotions don't last forever. They're just something we
Mm-mm.
have to experience and we have to go through, and different people experience and express them in different ways.
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, and being able to feel those emotions without acting on them also creates a lot of emotional safety.
Emotional safety is important in any relationship, and not just romantic relationships, listeners. This is something that if you have a friendship with someone and you consider yourself close or best friends, and you're sharing private things with this person, their reaction could shift you into a shutdown where you feel like I can't share things with them that are personal or private to me. This could be in a parent and child relationship. What kind of emotional safety does this child have? And, is this relationship allowing the space for me to be who I am right now? And in some cases, there may be necessary needs for change. If you're not able to express yourself in a healthy way, you may be the one that's causing a lack of emotional safety in that relationship. So maybe there are some things that could be worked on as far as managing your emotions.
I love that accountability piece, being able to gently reflect on our own behavior and look at how we are contributing to the situation is also really important.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to do that gently. If you're going to be mean to yourself about it, you're probably not going to reflect on your own contributions very well.
Exactly. So, Shane, can you give us some examples of what all this looks like?
Okay, so let's say one partner comes home irritated because the other person didn't respond to a text during the day. And they're saying something like, "Why didn't you text me back? I waited for hours."
Mm,
And there's a lot of emotional intensity there. So, as a way to regulate this, first you could name that emotion and really take accountability for that emotion. As an example, I'm feeling rejected and unimportant right now. You could also bring in another DBT skill, like the stop skill, where you're taking a pause, you're not speaking right away. You sit down, take a breath, kind of observe what's going on. Maybe you're
yeah.
making some assumptions, and then proceed mindfully. So choosing to say, hey, today I was feeling really ignored. Can I ask what happened?
Listen to me. You're speaking my language because I always tell clients be curious. Be curious. And that's exactly what that is. That's instead of assumptions and assuming and accusing, you're just being curious because you're exploring what it
Mm.
is instead of assuming.
Yes, it really
Yeah.
shifts from like accusation to curiosity. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say curiosity in relationships is also an act of love.
I love that.
Yeah, and then you're able to connect rather than have a sense of defensiveness. It actually creates space to be vulnerable in your relationship and work through problems together with lots of trust, and that can strengthen the relationship over time. So instead of looking at conflict as like a bad thing, it's how can we use this conflict to make us stronger in this relationship?
While also deepening how you're getting to know each other. Now we're getting to know each other because those barriers to know who each other are not in the way. We're sorting through and we're working through it.
Exactly.
Do you have another share, Shane? I would love for you to share another one.
Yes, I do. Another example that I would see very frequently, or that I do see very frequently, would be like you never help with the kids.
Uh,
So maybe one partner who's feeling really frazzled from a long day kind of snaps, right? You never help with the kids. I'm
mhm.
doing everything. So in this case, using some of that CBT, again, choosing the thoughts that are more helpful and more true and recognizing never probably isn't true, right? That's
Yeah,
not actually true. That's an absolute. And maybe noticing actually, maybe your partner did the bedtime routine yesterday.
that's like bringing you back to reality and letting you go back to that buffet. I love that because it's like I'm choosing to tell them that they never, when that's not true. So now their response is probably going to be defensive because they have to defend what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying instead of getting something productive out of that conversation. It's almost like a snowball into this conflict that's unnecessary immediately just by the choice of how to enter it.
Yes, exactly. These soft startups are super important. And
I
it's
love that.
totally,
Soft startups.
yes, soft startups. Yeah, and it's totally possible to communicate unmet needs in a clear way without blaming, which really invites the ability to have empathy and problem solve together. So maybe instead you can communicate, hey, I'm not saying this is your fault, and I'm noticing that I'm feeling really, really overwhelmed, and I'm wondering what we can do together as a couple to work through this.
Yes. Own your stick, right? When they say own your
Yes,
stick, it's a curse word
yes.
there. But yeah, it's like just own where you're coming from, own where you are, and don't put it on me. Don't put your baggage on
Hmm.
me and say I'm responsible for how you feel, what I should be doing, all these things, even though somewhere in there might be some truth to that. But it's really taking ownership for your own emotions, your own thoughts, and sharing them with your partner in a productive way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are not going to be in a relationship ever where we are not triggered.
Yeah,
It's important to feel safe being triggered in your relationships.
that's true. Wow, Shane, this has been a great time with you today. This conversation has been helpful even for me. It's reigniting some things from my journey in this space of marriage coaching, but it's really beneficial, I'm sure, for our listeners to just gain these soft skills that they can apply immediately. And I want to, again, to encourage everyone to please apply these skills because it costs you nothing but effort and time. But the opposite of applying them is going to cost you effort and time as well, just a different level of effort, a different level of time. Um, Shane, is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Yes. Oh, there's so many more skills that we could talk about too. I always like to say relationships are hard. And it's important to remember again that your emotions are not bad. It's not bad to argue, even. Arguing can actually lead to these beautiful moments of vulnerability where you're again able to deepen your trust and deepen that emotional intimacy, which really strengthens your relationship. And then we don't exist in a vacuum. If all of our basic needs were met, relationships would probably be relatively easy if we didn't have issues like
Right.
finances or health problems or whatever else might be going on in our world. Most of the people I work with probably wouldn't have relationship problems. So, really, if you come around to the same side of the table with your partner and look at it and shine a light over everything and start to notice this isn't really an issue with you or I completely, it might be a systemic issue.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps increase empathy and compassion, and it really helps us have a healthier conflict in our relationships.
Beautiful. Shane, how can listeners find you?
Okay, so I have an email address that y'all are welcome to reach out to me through. It's Shane, and that's spelled SHAYNE at renewaltherapysolutions.com. And if that's too long for you, you can also look me up on Psychology Today. I have a profile on there, and anyone is welcome to send me a message through that avenue as well.
Shane, it's been a blessing to have you here today and an honor. And I'm so glad that we had a chance to have this conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really great. It's a subject I'm very, very passionate about. Our relationships really improve our overall well-being just
Yes.
in many different areas. So I think these are super important conversations to have.
And I appreciate that. Let's give a big shout out to Shane for joining today's conversation. Some claps, some roars. So let's do some affirmations today for those pursuing relationships. I attract loving, supportive, and healthy relationships that nurture my growth and bring out the best in me. And this one is for those in a relationship. I am committed to fostering love, trust, and understanding in my relationship, and I embrace growth together with my partner. And this last one is for those struggling to thrive in their relationships. I commit to facing our challenges with understanding, patience, and a willingness to grow together. For homework, I'd like for you to sit with the status of your relationships. What is the pain point? Come back with that pain point next episode, and we can set some healthy boundaries. That's right. If you've never established boundaries before, here's your chance. And if you have set boundaries but haven't been able to hold them, we're going to work together on what it's like to establish healthy boundaries and equally establish healthy consequences. We're going to talk about how to hold those boundaries, and that is solely your responsibility. So again, make sure you come back with the pain point you want to set some healthy boundaries around. And this goes for all relationships, interpersonal, romantic, otherwise. Business relationships. Together, we're going to roll up our sleeves and do some good work. Until next time, join the conversation with Coach Wright.
Stay a while and subscribe.